Longlegs is a movie that will slowly creep under your skin and stay there long after the credits roll.
But you didn't.
Put the gun down!
And now that has led to all of this.
Look, I'm going to start off by saying if you're a fan of horror, this is a must-see. Longlegs is a movie that you should be running to the theater to watch. It is that good for a fan of horror. If you're not a horror fan, it may or may not work for you, but we'll get into that. Longlegs is the latest film from writer-director Osgood Perkins, who, interestingly, if you didn't know, has a bit of a connection to the genre, you might say. His father, Anthony Perkins, actually played Norman Bates in Psycho, and he himself, Osgood, played a younger version of Bates in Psycho 2, a smaller role, but it's safe to say that he's been surrounded by cinema, surrounded by great filmmakers for as long as he's been alive. This is not his first feature, although it is almost undoubtedly the film that is garnering him the most attention, deservedly so. Prior to this, he's probably most well known for The Blackcoat's Daughter, which is available to watch on Netflix. It's a 2015 film that was picked up by A24 that involves some overlapping themes. It's set at a Catholic boarding school. We have a character deliver the line, "Hail Satan," which becomes quite prominent here in Longlegs, so there is potentially some religious trauma that needs exploring, but he demonstrated in that film that he is a capable writer and director, but he, I think, stepped his game up here in Longlegs in a number of pretty significant ways. So this film follows FBI agent Lee Harker as she is searching for Longlegs, this mass serial killer played, of course, by Nic Cage. As Agent Harker kind of explores the case in more detail, she starts to unravel it and realize that she might share a connection with Longlegs that she was not initially aware of. As mentioned at the beginning, this won't work for everyone, but for the folks that it does work for, it will work almost perfectly. It is true to the genre in terms of honoring both the horror genre, but also kind of the psychological thriller crime genre, but it is also very unique in a number of ways. It has the very haunting, slow dolly zooms that we might expect from a genre picture, but the score and the sound design is a little bit elevated. It's not cheap, and it doesn't force you to feel fear. It doesn't kind of show its hand too early, but when it does hit, these percussive beats in the sound design are enough to make you jump out of your seat. The pacing is slow at times, but this is so effective. Longlegs is a film that just slowly eats away at you. It just creeps closer and closer until you feel it crawling inside your skin. And while that might not sound like a desirable outcome from a casual film watching experience, it really does do its job in provoking a tremendously real sense of anxiety. And that's really what Longlegs is. It's a film that incorporates this anxious undertone into every single shot. Every single frame is almost painted with this anxious feeling. The film, for the most part, is set in the 1990s, and Perkins has been kind of outspoken about influences for this aesthetic, this vibe of 90s horror. He mentioned Silence of the Lambs, of course, and crime kind of films like Seven, and you can definitely see those influences here in the pacing at times, in the composition of the frame when it comes to the color palette, and I do think that it honors those films while also setting out on its own path. While the majority of the film is rooted in the 1990s, we have flashbacks to the 70s, which are probably my favorite part of the film. In tandem with his DP, his cinematographer, Andres Aroki, they crafted something so gorgeous here. It's shot in what looks to be a 4:3 aspect ratio, but with rounded corners, a very grainy texture, kind of reminiscent of old Polaroid photographs, which are also incorporated throughout the film. These shots in particular, just from an aesthetic perspective, are impossible not to be drawn into, which makes the inevitable kind of scares, the violence that emerges from these 70s flashbacks that much more impactful because we're so drawn in to each and every frame. And at the end of the day, those are probably the strongest aspects of Longlegs, the aesthetics, the slow creeping pace, and the overall kind of atmosphere of anxiety that's created. I'll talk a little bit about the cast, the performances, the dialogue here, which is not quite as strong, but because the vibe, everything else from a technical standpoint that Perkins has put on screen is so strong, the potential limitations don't matter as much. So our main character, played by Maika Monroe, this FBI agent, it is fine in her performance. I think that I understand what Perkins is going for here. She is incredibly monotone. She is somewhat withdrawn. She does not have a tremendous amount of outward emotion, likely as a result of what the film will tell you later on, some things that perhaps have been repressed by herself or the devil, and as a result of this, she's not able to kind of be this complete person. Still, at times, the character was a little bit flat, and it became not impossible, of course, but slightly more difficult to have real deep empathy. Beyond this performance, though, what most people are probably excited to talk about, to see, to hear about is Nic Cage's performance. So Cage was kind of added onto this project very early on, and he actually served as one of the producers. He worked quite closely with Perkins in developing this character, from the actual aesthetic of the character. It's very heavily make-upped, some prosthetics, but also the voice of the character, the cadence of speaking, the actual words being used by Longlegs. This was all a collaborative process between the two. And his character is a character that you are just going to need to buy into. You're going to need to suspend your disbelief. I know that a lot of folks, particularly those that are not heavily invested into the genre, will look at this and say, oh my gosh, that is crazy Nic Cage doing crazy Nic Cage things. And when you have become as iconic as Nicolas Cage has, it can be difficult sometimes to separate the actor from these seemingly over-the-top characters. But if you're able to do so, it actually becomes pretty dark. If you can get past that initial recognition of the actor and the initial kind of absurdity of the character on a surface level, Longlegs just slowly finds a way to creep inside, and while it's a performance that I think I need to sit with for a while longer, I'm leaning toward really enjoying it. We also have a supporting performance from Blair Underwood as Agent Carter, very much rooted in kind of stock FBI characters, particularly the gender dynamics between the senior male officer and the junior female officer. He likes to drink, he's a little bit more powerful and assertive, and his performance is totally fine. He's probably strongest in the final act without going into spoiler territory, but when his character experiences a little bit of a change, he delivers one line in particular with so much power that really was the kind of singular moment in the film for that character, at least from my perspective. Within all these performances, there is some pretty cheesy dialogue. It's not always pitch perfect. This is something that I've found with Perkins' other works that is not quite as strong as kind of his visual knack and his understanding of tone and emotion. But again, as I mentioned earlier, some elements are so strong that certain pieces of the dialogue that might be a little bit contrived or a little bit unnatural don't matter quite as much as a result. Outside of the performances, of the vibe, the aesthetic, we also have some great music from the band T.Rex. We also have some of their lyrics incorporated into the film, and if you're a fan of T.Rex, of that kind of great rock music, then that certainly elevates the picture as well. At the end of the day, Osgood Perkins is a pretty brilliant director of horror. He demonstrated that here for sure. He has a vision that he is willing to adhere to push forward, even if at times it might seem risky. He, of course, does stick to a lot of the horror tropes, but elevates them in a way both aesthetically and tonally that make them work much better than a standard horror picture. And it's clear that this is an artist behind the camera. He has also directed a film that's coming out next year that should be pretty interesting. I can't recall the entire cast, but I know that Elijah Wood is in there. It's adapted from a short story of Stephen King's The Monkey, and the film, as of right now, shares that same name. So I think that we will be hearing a lot more about Perkins in the years to come. If you watched this video, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Like, comment, subscribe. Those are all very helpful things to me as a human being. And when I post another video, watch that one too, please. Thanks.